Hey, guy. Good morning, everybody. If it's morning, if you're watching this live, great. It actually might be in the Eastern time zone, a little later in the day for you, but thanks for being here. Hit that like button. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. And if you listen to the podcast, great. Mailbag will be fired up again soon. I checked yesterday. I've seen some of you reigniting the reviews. So you go to Apple Podcast. If you're an Apple Podcast user, if you're a Spotify user, I guess send me an Instagram DM and leave a review, though. 5 stars. It helps the podcast on Apple Podcast. And in that review, just leave a question. And that's how you get in the mailbag. And we'll be getting back to a mailbag soon enough. All right. NFL Combine begins today. Workout stuff begins a little later, but John Lynch is going to talk in a few hours, as I said, if you're watching it live on Tuesday. So we'll get to that. And I think generally speaking, the 49ers are in a pretty good position drafting 31st. And one of the reasons is that it's such a deep first round. Listen to this. If you just add up the quarterbacks, the tackles, and the receivers that probably, by my count, will go before the 49ers pick at 31, it's 16 players of those 3 positions, half of the first round. Now, tackles, who Albert Breer wrote on Monday, will be a heavily drafted group in the first round. He said he thinks 7 tackles could go before pick 20. It's why you're seeing a lot of mock drafts that have the Niners taking a tackle. They're actually taking tackles that project as guards or centers in the NFL. I know, as we talked about on Monday, there's some disagreement on Arizona Wildcat Jordan Morgan, whether or not he's a tackle or a guard. But regardless, even as if you want to guard at 31, as the Niners would, a tackle at 31, as the Niners would love to have, if there's 15 tier 1 tackles, you're probably not getting one at 31. So that's why I say if they want to tackle, they probably got to move up to get one. There are some mock drafts that have them taking a tackle at 31, but I think those are overly optimistic. I think we got to try and be at least, you got to prepare for the possibility that if you want to tackle, you're going to have to move up. That's the consensus right now, at least. Maybe weird stuff happens and a guy falls to you, but I don't think you can go into the draft assuming that that's going to happen. So if we go with what Breer reported, which is that 7 guys will go in the top 20, which is nowhere close 31, let's take those 7. And now let's go to the quarterbacks. I think, it's easy to just say, 5 guys are getting drafted in the first round. No problem. But, you have to actually kind of investigate it and figure out, are there 5 destinations for quarterbacks? Like, are 5 guys really going to go? Peter King wrote on Monday, as I talked about on Monday, that he thinks the Bears could do some trading. And so it doesn't come out of left field. Ryan Poles was very non-committal to Justin Fields, and he's clearly going to wait and see what kind of offers they get, probably for Fields, but more importantly, for the first pick. I think ultimately they got to draft Caleb Williams. But I think they're taking a quarterback. I think Washington is taking a quarterback. New England may or may not. Atlanta today, are they going to be in the category of teams taking a quarterback? On Tuesday, Raheem Morris, he's their coach now. Their old coach is the Steelers OC, Arthur Smith. Raheem Morris, asked about the quarterback situations of the Falcons, said, quote, if I had a better quarterback, or let me start over. If we, speaking of the Falcons, had better quarterback play, I probably would not be standing here at this podium. So he just saw the last coach, Arthur Smith, get fired because of the quarterback. Does not feel like he's about to hitch his wagon to Desmond Ridder. So I think they're on the quarterback watch from a draft position. Minnesota, Denver's looking for a quarterback. The Las Vegas Raiders looking for a quarterback. So we don't have to go through every team that might draft a quarterback here, but I do think here's where it's at with the QBs. 4 guys I believe are locks to go ahead of 31. 3 are stone cold locks. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Stone cold locks. I think Bo Nix will end up going before 31. So there's 4. I think there's one more that's probable to go ahead of 31, which is J.J. McCarthy. There's 5. And then I think maybe around 31 is where Michael Penix gets drafted. I didn't include him in this total number. I said 5 quarterbacks, conservatively 4 receivers, 7 tackles. Um, so that adds up to 16. But I mean, it could be more, right? And all of this means that if you're drafting somewhere other than those positions, and even if you are drafting, say, a tackle that's going to be a guard, but if you want anything else, if you want a corner, if you want a pass rusher, if you want a linebacker, if you want a running back, no, that guys are getting pushed down to you. So it's a very meaty. It's not viewed as a deep draft in rounds 4, 5, 6, 7, but it is viewed as a good first round. And as I said, maybe Michael Penix. You know, there is this possibility that somebody wants to move up to 31 to draft a quarterback. Quarterbacks always seem to be, and this happens with receivers too. There's been a run on receivers in first rounds a few times in recent years. But, you know, all this NFL stuff, you know, is a result of surge pricing. Reports all over the place on Tuesday morning that Wendy's, Dave, is going to test surge pricing based on demand. Dave's single quarter pound cheeseburger, according to the CEO Kirk Tanner on an investor call earlier this month, which is currently priced at $5.95 in LA. This is an article from Fox 11 in LA, but this applies across the nation. They could raise the dollar as much. They could raise the price as much as $1 on Dave's single quarter pounder burger during the lunch rush, and then could dip it during slow periods. I remember working with a guy many years ago who used to go to Taco Bell every day before his 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock afternoon show. And every time he'd come in, it always made me laugh. He'd be like, why are there so many people at the Taco Bell drive-thru at 1:30? And I'd say, why are you at the Taco Bell drive-thru at 1:30? So if you're a post-peak lunch eater, then maybe surge pricing could be beneficial to you. Although the article does not say, and they did not say on their investor call, whether or not they will lower below regular prices during non-peak hours, right? So if the burger's normally $5.95 and then it goes to $6.95 at noon, is it going to go to $4.95 at 3 o'clock? I doubt it. Wendy's claims they're focused on great tasting, fresh, high-quality food, doing it the way that brings value to our customers. Yeah. McDonald's, I did not know this. McDonald's recently received criticism over its Big Mac combo, which is priced at nearly $18, among other menu hikes, and has promised to focus on affordability, the New York Post reported. The burger chain said it plans to pump the brakes on higher prices. McDonald's says U.S. traffic fell slightly as it saw fewer visits from customers with annual incomes of under $45,000. There was another article that suggested some other types of dynamic pricing. Oh, here we go. Dynamic pricing offering in certain parts of the day, AI-enabled menu changes, and suggestive selling based on factors such as weather. It's a little cold outside. How about some soup? It's a little hot outside. How about some ice cream? Dynamic pricing. So it's coming to fast food near you. But if you're an NFL draft fan, this is nothing new. Surge pricing has existed around the draft every year. It occurs around the draft at quarterback. And it could occur at 31 for the 49ers if there's a team that wants to come up. And that's where it seems like beginning of the second round, end of the first. You know, watching a lot of Michael Penix, I thought it was crazy that some of these guys were valued so much greater than him. We'll see. This is a big week for him. Medical testing, if he does it, because that seems to be the thing that scares a lot of people off at age. The problem with this idea of, say, a quarterback at 31, someone wants to come get him, is when you go look at the top of the second round, there's not a lot of attractive spots to be with teams that may move up for a quarterback. To me, and you can look at the second round and tell me something different, but to me, when I look at the top of the second round, like a team that might be interested in doing that, moving up to the end of the first, is Minnesota. They drafted 42. That might be a little far. You may not want to go from 31 to 42. Like in an ideal world, you just go from 31 to 34, 35. But, you got to find somebody who wants a quarterback sitting there. And I guess you could make a couple of trades. A lot could happen. But I put that low on the probability list. So, whatever, that aside, you got your receivers, your locks, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors. Some people, there's starting to be some buzz that Malik Neighbors out of LSU is going to be number one on not like a couple teams' boards, but on a lot of teams' boards as the number one receiver. We'll see if that, we'll see what order those guys go in. But, those three guys are going. Brian Thomas Jr. seems like he's the next guy up. And then there's a drop off. Adonai Mitchell from Texas. It might be the end of the first round, beginning of the second. So I think we can say reasonably, I'm leaving him out, that there's 4 receivers. I think we can say reasonably that there's 5 quarterbacks. That's 9. And going with the Breer report, 7 tackles in the top 20. That's 16. So there's 16 players in those 3 positions that'll get drafted ahead of the Niners spot at 31, which means that if you want to go guard, I guess in some ways you'd have your first pick of the guards. But if you want to go guard, you're not taking a tier 1 offensive lineman at that spot, but that's okay at least because there is surge pricing on tackles. So you could still get a really good player there. I think it's unlikely they go receiver there unless Brandon Ayuk gets traded. And even then, I'd be a little surprised. But they could do it. And they could also move back into the second round and do it. I don't think they would do that. And then a quarterback, obviously, they're not in the mix for a quarterback in the first round. So, if you're in the group of people that thinks they should draft a cornerback at the end of the first round, which I actually tend to not think, it's been weird for them there. I know the idea came up. I saw David Lombardi wrote about, if you were in the market for a pass rusher, a defensive lineman, maybe this would be a good draft to do it in just because guys might get pushed down. But as I said yesterday, they've only drafted interior linemen twice in the top 4 rounds in this regime. And only once in the top 3 rounds have they taken an interior defensive lineman. And, that was Kinlaw. So it feels a little unlikely that maybe they go free agency on the defensive line. Maybe they're optimistic on Drake Jackson at this point. He was dinged up, but he's been, he's had physical issues for 2 years in a row. So stock is down a little bit. And that's somebody that I'm, I was pretty optimistic about before the season started. And he's still got plenty of time. He's going to get the opportunity, which is good. He'll just, he's got to earn it. He's got to rehab now, but I don't think you can look at it the way you did last year because it's 2 years in a row now that, physical issues have prevented him from becoming the pass rusher opposite of Nick Bosa. So I think it's good news. I think that's all good news for the 49ers. Comment, why not trade up for a guard though? Jackson Powers Johnson would be great out of Oregon. I know my guy Jeff Schwartz is big on JPJ, productive player, pro-ish style concepts in that offense, physical run team. They did throw it short a lot, so you have to have good feel as an offensive lineman just to manage that. Mobile quarterback who does a little bit of ad-libbing, so he's got some experience with that. But are you going to be able to get him at 31? Doesn't feel like it. So I'm for it. Like if you got to move up to get the offensive lineman you like, and it's not a tackle, but you've got a guy dialed in at guard, and you got to move up 5 spots to get him, I'm good with it. And I think the Niners have shown they'll move up for players that they like in the first round. Comment from Bowler Dan: we need to draft a good offensive tackle or guard for years now. Just do it finally. And comment from Generation Retro, day 15 of Bill Belichick watch. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan, not in a rush. He's the only guy hiring a defensive coordinator, I think. I mean, Sean McDermott, there was a story today that they're still deciding the defensive coaching staff structure, like who's going to call defense, but it doesn't seem like he's probably not about to hire a defensive coordinator from the Jets or Belichick or Vrabel. So nothing to be afraid of there. And it's the third year in a row that Shanahan is not at the NFL Combine. John Lynch saying and I'm reading here from 49ers Web Zone, and this is some of the stuff that Lynch said last year is a good job by them to pull this back. Kyle not being here is not an indication that the combine is not important for him or us. Couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I think COVID taught us all that they can very much be a part of this via Zoom with player interviews. They can watch the workouts that happen. We get all the tape. You go back and watch them anyway. Let's work harder, not smarter, that's become the 49ers mantra as it relates to the combine. Look, if your last game of the year is around New Year's, then maybe it's a little bit of a different story. But for these guys, that's not the case. They play into mid-February. It's probably good for John Lynch to get out and do a few things on his own, give Kyle a break, and it's probably good for Kyle Shanahan to get a little bit of a break. So it's I don't think it's a big thing. Now that said, like Marvin Harrison Jr. not showing up to the combine, the NFL would love for Kyle Shanahan to be there because it means he would speak, and then that would be news. But Kyle talked a lot through the end of the year. The NFL would love for Marvin Harrison Jr. to be there, not showing up. No agent, so you can't squeeze him. If you had an agent, you'd be able to say like to the agent, like, "Hey man, get this guy there. Like, convince this guy he needs to be there." But no agent, so harder to manipulate him. The NFL calendar is basically year round now. They generally get what they want, but having star players not show up, it's one thing to have star players not work out. To have a big name star player not show up, suboptimal for the NFL. They'd love to have Marvin there. I'd love for Marvin to be there. I'd love for Marvin to sit up there with Daniel Jeremiah and Mayock. We need Mayock back. I need Mayock's big board where he would do one big board. That would be it. No updates. No one mock draft. And that would be it. No 2.0s. I miss Mayock. He did some like Westwood Radio. Got to hear him a little bit doing that. But I think that's the next challenge for the NFL as it relates to the combine is just find a way to get your star players. Even if guys don't want to work out, that's fine. Quarterbacks have been doing this forever. But if you could find a way to get Marvin there, do you send him a jet for 10 hours? Get him in there, do an interview, just be on TV, promote Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be on TV. He's not doing it. It's not going to matter. It doesn't affect his draft stock. Teams will get to go talk to him. He's a big time prospect, but I would like to see it. As it relates to Jackson Powers Johnson, Steve says he plays center. I think he can play guard also, but maybe I should get Schwartz on here and talk to him about that. Comment from Gregus. John Lynch hasn't drafted a cornerback before round 3. They've done a good job later rounds, at least with guys that, seem like they're functional pros. We'll see with Darrell Luter. He was a 5th-round pick last year. Samuel Womack was a 5th-round pick the year before. Diamador Lenore was a 5th-round pick the year before that. Talanoa Hufanga was a 5th-round pick in that draft. It's DJ Reed was a 5th-round pick. I guess we could just go ahead and target the 5th. Akello Witherspoon was a 3rd-round pick. That was John Lynch's first draft. So, that would be the one. And, he took a lot of flack. He took a lot of heat. But he's been an NFL starter for a significant amount of time. He was one for them and, has been one for other teams. So, I know you want more out of a 3rd rounder, but he's played a lot of stuff. I'm just looking at Akello here. Played 17 games. Actually, it was the first time he's played a full season. But he came into the league and played double-digit games for 4 straight years for the Niners. Maligned, but, that's just getting some depth there is actually like that's where Ambry Thomas to me is. If Ambry Thomas is on your roster, just is not one of your starting corners, that's good depth. If Diamador Lenore is a starter, drafted. Mooney Ward, free agent. Okay, get your 3rd corner, and then Ambry is some depth for you. That's fine. Like you're not going to have. I was watching Dan Campbell talk today, and he said, their big emphasis is just is depth, drafting for depth. He's like, you just need depth to get through a season, and that's how we're going to draft. Like, our philosophy is going to be that. I mean, they took a volume of guys at kind of non-premium positions last year, quote unquote, and it worked out. I don't know if there's really such a thing, but and it worked out for them. So, that's how I view. You need some of that. Now, the Niners clearly they're going to need a couple starters. You're going to need a linebacker. Now, maybe you got that internal with Jalen Graham or D. Winters. Maybe you can do it in free agency. You need another pass rusher. Shaq Barrett just got cut today because he was going to have $15 million coming to him if the Bucs kept him, but he's older. But anyway, the point is the Niners haven't gone there. I don't think they will this year either. I mean, is this one of those things where it's just so obvious that they're going to go offensive line that they, that it's just like everyone's talking about it and that's not what they actually do? Or is it so obvious that they're going to go offensive line because in a rare instance, everybody agrees that they need to go offensive line? I tend to think it's the latter. Comment, the run on cornerbacks in this draft will be crazy. Teams will want to replicate what Kansas City has done. I have not seen any data on this. It feels like cornerback is a high miss percentage position in the draft. Feels like cornerbacks miss more than most, and nobody hits above, all these guys are 35 to 40% hit rates, I would think, but I would be very, very careful around cornerbacks in the first round, just generally, unless I'm in the top, 12 or something like that. It feels like these back end of the first round guys. Now, McDuffie was a good one. What round? What pick was McDuffie? Like, did they have to move up to get him? McDuffie was 21. That's a hell of a pick. It's a perfect pick, is what it is. Just Mike says, have to draft Jalen Polk if he's there at 31 and be super happy with him for years to come. I disagree. I don't think he's that level of prospect from an athleticism standpoint. He was the number 3 receiver on a team with two really good a clear number 1 in Rome Odunze, a definitive college number 2 in Jalen McMillan. Jalen Polk's a little older, not old, but he's not like a 3-year twitchy guy, which is kind of what Ayuk was not a 3-year guy, but he was a much better prospect, I thought, coming out than Jalen Polk is. So that would be an overdraft for me. I would not take Jalen Polk in the first round. Comment, last year we didn't think we'd make a splash. We got Hargrave. Will we do that again this year? Talking free agency. I don't know if it'll be quite as splashy, but yes, I expect them to do something in free agency that's impactful. I don't think it'll be quite that splashy, but I do put them in the category. Like, when you are a team that is Super Bowl ready, you just find a way to go get a impact player. And for them, like, that might mean an older pass rusher, which is typically not their MO though in free agency. Bazyman says, wonder if we sign Lincoln Tomlinson. Oh, he's very good. I would think not. Dale says Hargrave's splash was garbage. I don't think he was garbage, but losing Eric part of his value was that you'd have Eric Armstead with him, and they didn't have Eric Armstead much with him. I think he's a good player, but yeah, I mean, that's a classic surge price. You overpaid for a premium position based on if all of the guys that played that position were available. Would he be kind of the number 1 option? Of course not. But he's also, he's not the problem. Marcellus says, don't rule out receiver early. They need speed. Another guy that a lot of people like is Troy Franklin, who is not big. He's fast. Wiry, though, needs to add a few pounds. Washington did a pretty good job against him. Watching some of his stuff, I watched a lot of Troy this year. It felt like he was just running WAO, wide ass open against zone coverage a lot. But that's, they're in the realm. That's in the window of where they're drafting. End of the first round, beginning of the second round. And he's the type of guy that would be there. They tried it with Danny Gray. When you really look, the Niners have not, this is where I think Ronnie Bell, I should probably give Ronnie Bell a bit of a break. We've talked about him a lot. I have, at least, in the same vein as Danny Gray, because to Ronnie's credit, he's played his way, I've thought, ahead of Danny. Ronnie was a 7th round pick. So, they kind of took a flyer on him, and he was a piece they needed. Like, they needed him in the special teams game this year. I have not seen him as a guy ready to replace one of the 49ers' top 3 receivers, but they drafted him in the 7th round. Danny Gray, on the other hand, was drafted for a very specific reason, and has not produced at all, like nothing. And it's not just for lack of opportunity. If you're going to be a young receiver in this organization, you're going to have to be able to show. Juwan Jennings is a great example of this, that you can make an impact in limited opportunity. Jennings has a role. He's big. It's 3rd down. He blocks the other 2 downs, and then we get him the rock on 3rd down, right? Like, that mindset, you're going to get limited opportunity. So when it comes to your time, we're going to throw you a go ball. You got to go get it. Now, the Niners don't have a lot of track record hitting on deep balls. I think it's more related to their history with their coach, and also the fact that they just haven't had a receiver that can just go do it. But to this point, it hasn't been Danny, because ideally, well, first of all, if you're going to be a little bit of a specialist, then the defense is going to know exactly what's happening when you come onto the field. So you've got to be able to do some other stuff, and he's just not been consistent enough. But Ronnie has, I think, Ronnie's been solid value. Super chat from Tyler. Thoughts on Brendan Rice? Worth a pick? Yes, actually. As I've said this before about Brendan Rice from USC, started at Colorado. I thought showed promise when he was at Colorado. I remember doing some of his games when he was at Colorado. The coaching staff really liked him. Just a solid dude. I've talked to him on multiple occasions. Well-adjusted, handles the spotlight that comes with being Jerry Rice's son. And, from what I can tell, handled it well. He was at Super Bowl Media Day, or he was at Radio Row doing stuff. He's been doing a campaign already throughout the year, or at least after the season, with Breathe Right. So he's got a level of comfort with being in the spotlight. Could he handle being on the Niners as Jerry Rice's son versus being on the Colts or being on the Texans or just being literally anywhere else? That would maybe be a minor question. But in my experience with him and talking to people around him, I think it's a borderline non-issue. It'd be a question you ask him. It'd be a question that the 49ers scouts will ask around at SC. But he's been in the bright lights, and I think it's a non-issue. He's been playing with that name for a long time and has gotten this far because he's just a solid all-around. He's a willing blocker. He can kick off return, which might be key for the Niners this year with Ray. And he's a solid receiver. And he's big and physical. So, yeah, I don't know what you're not taking him the 1st or 2nd round, but that's okay. I think that probably makes it even better. In an ideal world, I know for him, an ideal world, you're a 1st or 2nd round pick. I think in an ideal world, he's like a 4th round pick. He's already going to come in with Rice on his back. Being overdrafted would only add pressure to him. But, it's playing at SC is a big deal. He went from Colorado to SC, transitioned fine. Played on a team with a lot of star power, played on a team with other famous guys. Jordan Addison was there 2 years ago. Mario Williams, one of USC's key receivers. They get all these Malik Brown. They just got a lot going on. And he was fine. Like, I thought he seems pretty, what's the word I'm like, just, drama free, low maintenance is the phrase I'm looking for. He seems pretty low maintenance, which is great because he's going to get an outsized amount of attention if he shows up anywhere, but if he shows up on the 49ers for sure, right? And now that said, this is where your locker room matters. Like Brandon Ayuk doesn't really care if you're interviewing other people. He'd be fine with you not interviewing him. Deebo Samuel does not care if no one's interviewing him. He'd be fine talking to Kay Adams once a week and never having to talk again. So from that, like these guys don't, I think it's a locker room that would not care if Brendan Rice came in and started getting a bunch of attention before he'd done anything. It doesn't matter to these guys. So I think it would work. Tommy says, please no Deebo returns. Yeah, please no Deebo returns. Question from Thomas. Is there a recent history of non-QBs coming back from Achilles tears? I'm such a big Greenlaw fan, but this might be the beginning of the end. It might be. Now the good news for him is he's not 31. I don't know the answer to that question immediately. You look back at, let's look at a few names here. The Athletic just wrote an article end of last year because of Kirk Cousins. Cam Akers tore his ACL mid-July 2021, had a remarkable recovery, was back just before Christmas that year, so that was very fast. Marlon Mack, Klay Thompson, more common injury in the NBA. Kevin Durant, you got KD. Obviously, in the NBA, you can account for, you can overcome it a little bit. You get to hold the basketball. You can create a little different for a guy like a linebacker. Justice Hill, Tariq Cohen, tore his ACL. Well, Cohen, it was an ACL and an Achilles. Yeah, that was not a good return, but that's an extra major injury. Frank says Crabtree returned the same season. And the question with Greenlaw would be, is it similar to what happened with Crabtree? Crabtree came back, but really was not, if you remember, he was not really back. His body was on the field and he returned, but I think he eventually came back again the next year. It took another year for him to get better. But, Crabtree was, in the NBA, you can lose your explosion and just adjust. Vince Carter, as he aged, just became a shooter, and it worked. In the NFL, like Dre Greenlaw can't just become a shooter. Crabtree was always a guy that won with physicality, size, not speed, not explosion. One of Dre Greenlaw's great qualities, he's a really good anticipator, but he's explosive. He's punishing. And, I think it's maybe a little bit harder for a defensive player because it's a reactive position. The offense knows where it's going. The offensive player can fake you out, can try to sell with a movement. Defense, there's no faking. It's straight. It's just reaction time. And so I think it hurts him more than it would some of these other guys. I don't really think we've got. I'm sure there's some defensive players. Hit me with some other suggestions as we go. I'll do a little digging if there's other guys that we can come up with, but I don't feel like there's a ton of comps. I mean, definitely we've got to find a few, but I don't know, man. I agree that it's you're hopeful, but I think you got to be skeptical. Like, so when people say, well, you don't really need to add a linebacker because Greenlaw's coming back, he'll be back in October, November. I don't think you can rely on that. I think you've got to operate as if, you're just, I don't think you can expect a lot, hope for the best, expect less than that. How many years did Richard Sherman play? How many years did Richard Sherman play post Achilles? God, Richard's only 35. Richard, what was his Achilles year? Because, oh yeah, it was the year before he became a Niner, because I remember going to camp and watching him out there against the Niners. 17, bothered by 17, the Achilles injured week 5. So he had 17 he had the rest of, he had a lot of 17 and then came back. I remember him being at practice and like kind of starting slow. I mean, but I got Richard's an exception. It feels like Richard's an exception to me. Gregis says you have to proceed as if Greenlaw and Hufanga are not available. We'll find out. If you're watching this after John Lynch has spoken, then you probably have a good idea of what an update on Hufanga is. So we'll get that on Tuesday. Actually, I'll probably be back on Tuesday after John Lynch talks and talk about that a little bit. For now, gonna jump out of here on YouTube. And thanks for being here. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Podcast, if you want to hear it, is down in the description below. Podcasters, if you want to watch, you can click on the YouTube, which is in the description of the pod. And I'll be back on YouTube again Tuesday. More videos coming. Thanks for hanging, everybody. Later.